Hello and welcome to this overview of the processes available for Beijing+25. My name is Sharon Bhagwan-Rolls and I'm from Fiji. And in this presentation, produced in collaboration with NGO CSW New York, I'll preview highlights of our collective journey to Beijing+25 and beyond, along with a few women from the Asia-Pacific region who are also contributing to this journey. So why should Beijing+25 matter? Let's go back a few years, in fact a few decades, to 1975, which was declared the UN International Year for Women. It was the start of a decade for women, a decade when the United Nations convened a series of world conferences on women in Mexico, Copenhagen, and in Nairobi, where the 10-year global gender policy, the Nairobi Forward-Looking Strategies, was adopted. It was also a time of unprecedented global mobilization of women without the internet. That's right, women got together at local, national, regional, and international level for parallel NGO convenings and forums. Women's rights activists and feminists, including young women's rights activists and feminists from our own regions, all came together, working in solidarity and creating a vibrant new wave of activism. So what was happening in the Pacific? I'm speaking now to Quiniselane Tago Elisara. She's the director of the Social Development Program focusing on gender, culture and youth at the Pacific Community. She's going to explain how we mobilized in the Pacific region to adopt the Pacific Platform for Action in 1994, which guided the way for Pacific women's engagement at the Beijing Conference.
The Pacific Platform for Action was endorsed to mobilize a Pacific voice at the Beijing Conversations and to highlight what are the issues that are of relevance to the Pacific. Post Beijing 1995, it then became the Regional Charter for Gender Equality, and it continued to be the platform that we use to guide implementation at regional level, but to also help countries at national level to, again, provide guidance around priorities for gender and what are some of the outcomes for gender equality that they need to aspire or work towards. The new iteration of the Platform for Action was about the how. It was really about defining an implementation mechanism to help us as a region to advance and accelerate our gender equality commitments.
So just as the Beijing Platform for Action gives strategic policy direction at the global level, this is clearly a strategic direction or set of priorities and the how, as you said, to make it local, to make it relevant within Pacific Island countries and territories as well.
It provides the policy framework for us to get organized and for us to look at how we can better frame our global and regional commitments on gender equality and how those things could then be translated at national and local level.
You have previously produced a report coinciding, I think, with, was it Beijing +10 or 15? So will
20,
there
20,
be
20 and 15.
So will there be a Pacific report for Beijing+25?
We are in the process of pulling together a Beijing +25 Pacific overview report. This will be based on the national level reviews that countries themselves have led as part of the UN Women and UNESCO process. So we will be compiling that into a regional overview report, providing some trends analysis of what's happened across the different areas, critical areas of the Beijing Declaration. We've also decided that we will include additional areas that are specific and relevant to our context. For example, a chapter on women and culture. There will also be an additional chapter on women and climate change, women and disability. And I think the other one was going to be on for women with all diversities.
Okay.
So there will be chapters in addition to the critical areas of the Beijing Declaration and Platform for Action.
The triennial conference, the last one here in Fiji, gave civil society 2 seats at the table.
Yeah.
And we're looking at, civil society organizing ahead of the ESCAP meeting in Bangkok. How would you like to encourage civil society to engage in this Beijing +25 process?
Like anything, like any process, partners or parties that come to the table need to understand what the value is it for us. What's in it for us? Yes, we will have a seat, but how is it going to add value to what we do? And I think as CSOs are able to reflect and answer that question, then we don't have to be doing the pushing. Then they would realize themselves that it's important for them to be there. This is not just about CSOs' voices, but it's really about strengthening the collective. And that as we work towards engaging in the Asia-Pacific regional conversations and review, it's important for us to understand that voice in that broader context. That it's not just about us as CSOs, it's not just about us as regional organizations or us as governments, but it's about us as the collective and how we can better organize to advance our issues at the regional discussions and onwards to the global review, but to also ensure that our voices are heard in the broader Asia-Pacific conversations, acknowledging the challenge that we continue to have, that it's always the Asians that dominate the conversations and the discussion because of size and scope in that. But I think we need to always be strategic about how we engage in those spaces and how we organize ourselves, including how we engage CSOs.
You've been to ESCAP meetings, obviously, as well as CSW, and the strength of the Pacific region is flourishing to some degree. But what would be your message also to our Asian sisters? What do they need to understand about our Pacific region?
I think it's, again, the perspective on the collective. It's about understanding our issues and needs as a region, but also understanding how we can leverage the relationships with other sub-regions to advance those issues. It's almost like our message to our Asian counterparts is, we can help you so you can also help us, and vice versa. And it's, like I was saying, it's about strengthening that collective. But also, like I was saying before, it's about understanding what is the value for us? What will we gain? And also be prepared to answer the question of what is it that we will lose? What do we need to give up in order to really strengthen those links with the Pacific and those relationships with our counterparts in the Pacific?
So next year, we've got CSW 64 and then the 2 gender equality forums. And we're talking to UN Women and Nalini from FWRM in this conversation. So I want to talk to you more specifically about what are the plans for the next Pacific Women's Conference.
So the next Pacific Women's Conference, French Polynesia is hosting. You recall, Sharon, that at the last triennial, we wanted to have a bit more focused and targeted conversation. Previously and over the years, we've had to address all of the different areas of the Pacific Platform for Action in the conversation at the triennial. And over time, there's been some feedback about maybe there's a need for us to be a bit more focused in the conversation. And so at the last triennial, we decided to have one specific focus of the discussion, and that was women's economic empowerment, which was the theme for the triennial. But recognizing the intersectionalities of women's economic empowerment with climate change, with women's health and women's education, and so forth. This time, now that we've got the new Pacific Platform for Action, one of the key things that we will be looking at the triennial is the Beijing +25 review report for the Pacific and what that means for us.
A number of people are saying that while there's been a lot of focus recently on the Sustainable Development Goals, the Beijing Platform for Action, like the Pacific Platform for Action, is still very relevant. looking ahead for the next 10 years after Beijing Plus 25, what are you seeing through the work that you're doing in the Pacific community where there needs to be particularly the investment of resources in tracking the money for gender equality? Where should we be investing, or is it still, it needs to be across the board?
Related to the SDGs is the whole challenge around data and statistics. We've started some work on that, but I think there needs to be a lot more investment in generating the evidence and data to help us inform the direction of where we're heading, but also to help us keep track of how we're doing in the context of these global frameworks and also our own regional and national frameworks. Certainly the different priorities, we have our priorities as a region: women's economic empowerment, violence against women, women in political leadership is a big one. But I think having the data to also then inform, as I was saying, policies and drive the responsiveness, gender responsiveness of institutions across the board are also some of the important considerations in terms of priorities.
So we shouldn't just be looking at the 12 critical areas of concern, if you want, of the Beijing Platform for Action, but maybe scrutinizing more the institutional mechanisms, that guide the how and can track better what that progress is.
That would be the way to do it. It's not just about looking at addressing the sector priorities for gender, but also looking at those mechanisms. This would build on the work that we're currently moving into, where we're working with central agencies, targeting central agencies, and looking at your finance and your national planning mechanisms to ensure that they're gender responsive and that they are allocating the resources that we need to advance our gender objectives.
Final question, because we're looking at, the next 10 years from 2020 onwards. For a young woman who might be starting out on her journey with Beijing Plus 25, or a woman in a rural Pacific Island community, what's your message to them? Why should they care about what's happening in 2020?
They should care because it's not just about looking backwards, but it's about looking forwards. And it's about us having a say on how we frame the future for our women and our girls. And that's why it's important. And, when you say something like that, who wouldn't be interested? And who wouldn't want to be part of the conversation and wouldn't want their voices heard? Because it's about the future and it's about caring about what happens after we're not here. When we're no longer here, who will continue to take this work forward and sustain all of these things?